Ukrainian journalist Butusov, with a fairly detailed overview of the Avdiivka battlefield, saying that mistakes were made by the military command that led to the current crisis. But Ukrainian forces remain in a favorable position if they manage to organize defense of the flanks properly. Battle for Avdiivka as of November 2nd. A critical situation developed, and there was a real threat of losing the city situation. Today, Russian troops crossed the railway line near the village of Stepov and began assault operations near the village itself, north of Avdiivka. Russian infantry has entrenched behind the railway and is accumulating to expand the bridgehead and to attack the Avdiivka coke plant, a key complex of structures that controls the approaches to Avdiivka. The capture of the plant will mean a gradual but inevitable complication of defenses and capture of the city. Suddenly, it turned out that during the battle in Avdiivka, not a single commander had built a rear line of defense, and it is necessary to dig in now. There are no ready positions. Russian assaults continue south of Avdiivka, where they are expanding the breakthrough in the area of the sand pit near the village of Opitny, which is the second direction of encirclement of Avdiivka. Here the threat also increases. Ukrainian troops are having success in combat operations directly in the city of Avdiivka. The 110th Mechanized Brigade skillfully repulsed all Russian attacks, completely restored several positions that the enemy captured during massive assaults on October 10th, 19, and even improved its positions in some directions. There is currently no threat of the enemy entering the city. Why is Avdiivka a tactical trap for the Russians? Now many will remember the scenario of the loss of Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, Soledar, and Bakhmut. But the situation in Avdiivka is tactically different. First, the 110th Mechanized Brigade demonstrates exceptional combat capability and reliably holds the city, preventing the enemy from getting a hold of the city's buildings. The enemy is advancing north and south of the brigade's positions. Secondly, our troops have much more advantageous positions in terms of tactics, and they hold the flanks of the breakthrough well. Russian troops advance north of Avdiivka along a narrow corridor in the lowlands up to 4 kilometers wide. From this corridor, they are trying to cut our 8 kilometers wide supply routes to Avdiivka. Most of the enemy's rotations and reserves will be damaged during the advance, as the Ukrainian troops reliably hold the flanks and control the commanding heights with convenient firing sectors. The Russian infantry is suffering significant losses, and it is much more difficult for the enemy to conduct an offensive and hold positions than it is for us to defend. Thirdly, if we stabilize the defense north of Avdiivka, then even in positional defense, Russian troops will suffer losses many times higher than ours. The situation near Avdiivka carries much more risks for the Russian troops than for us. Fourth, the Russian troops do not have a large numerical advantage. The Ukrainians have a significant number of people and equipment. But in order to use all the advantages of our position, it is necessary to stabilize the defense. What shall I do? Our command has several action scenarios. First, the Bakhmut-Soledar scenario is to look for some units and direct them one by one into counterattacks, that is, head-on collisions with the advancing enemy, which are reduced to a quick exchange of manpower and to temporarily equipped lines, where the infantry somehow has to dig in, which leads to a quick loss of fighting capacity. To count our forces using staff reports and numbers of flags on the map, all the advances of the enemy should be justified by his great superiority in forces and not by deficiencies in our management. The main thing here is to constantly report that everything possible is being done and efforts are being made to restore the situation. Second, normal scenario. Return the command of the troops north and south of the city to the command of the 110th Brigade, which has understanding of the situation and responsibility for the result, as it was before, during the main assaults. We need a single intelligence system, a single system. Transfer at least 2 battalions with responsible commanders with adequate combat experience and authority to be attached to the plant. The command of units that are not capable of building a defense in the direction of Stepov should be immediately replaced by more proven and more experienced ones. There are such brigades and combatants in the reserve of the General Staff. Regarding the quality of the reserves, if someone thinks that a battalion is any crowd of 600 mobilized with random commanders at the head, then it does not work like that. The reserves are not random, but controlled. The advantage in war is created by the commanders of the tactical unit. Stabilization of the defense will allow the Russian bridgehead in the area of Stepov and the factory to be squeezed from all sides, and to establish a systematic destruction of the Russian infantry. Let them sit there like in a shooting range. In that lowland, they will not be able to gather strength, and it will be a great shooting range for our guns. Supreme Commander-in-Chief Zelensky held many stake meetings in Avdiivka. But first of all, it must be said frankly, the crisis in Avdiivka is not a consequence of the great advantage of the Russians or their great superiority. It is also a crisis of some of our management decisions and approaches that do not give us the opportunity to realize our advantages. For civil society, if we want to keep Avdiivka, the value of which is much higher even than Bakhmut, we need to help the soldiers of the 110th Mechanized Brigade with the maximum number of drones, and we need the installation of video surveillance cameras at various objects. In our power to turn a crisis into a victory, we need the maximum concentration of efforts. And other news. The Kremlin has ordered regional officials to file weekly reports on the recruitment of marginalized people in Russia for its war in Ukraine. The investigative news website iStories reported Thursday, citing an official letter it obtained. The letter, which is dated October 3rd, lists the office of the presidential envoy to Russia's Central Federal District as the author, and states that military recruitment orders have been in place since March 1st, 2023. iStories notes that an attached document identifies some 22 disadvantaged categories of Russians who are targeted for contract-based recruitment into the military. Additional instructions order regional officials to track the number of people who are approached and agree to sign military contracts on a weekly basis. Priority targets for war recruitment are reportedly given to migrants and recently naturalized citizens, as well as debtors and the unemployed. It feels like they're getting rid of a marginalized layer of society. An anonymous recruitment officer in one of Russia's regions was quoted as saying by iStories, "They don't care at all about the quality of the army," the officer added. "They don't care what will happen to the recruits' families after they're deployed." The recruitment letter reveals that the Russian military still struggles to motivate people to voluntarily sign up for its war in Ukraine, said Sergei Krivenko, who heads the NGO Citizen Army and the Law. Signing a contract is still voluntary, but it's possible to persuade, set conditions, or make life unbearable, Krivenko told iStories. If everything was so good and people were signing contracts themselves, we wouldn't need all these tricks and efforts by regional authorities or monitor and kick those regional authorities.
Thanks for watching and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.